Welcome to WION. You're watching Inside South Asia with me, Neha Khanna. It's the show that takes an in-depth look at the week's biggest news stories from South Asia and how they impact your life. Our big focus on the show today, we look at the life and contested legacy of General Parvez Musharraf, the former Pakistan president and army chief who passed away last week. Here's a quick look at what's coming up. General Parvez Musharraf, the military dictator who ruled Pakistan with an iron fist for 9 years, passed away last week while living in exile in Dubai. Known as the architect of the Kargil war between India and Pakistan, Musharraf was one of the most powerful and polarizing figures in Pakistan. He was credited with stabilizing the country's economy, but also loathed for tearing its constitution to shreds. How will history judge him? Here's a look at his life and checkered legacy. One of the most powerful but polarizing figures in Pakistan's history, General Parvez Musharraf leaves behind a checkered legacy. Known in India as the architect of the Kargil war, Musharraf was one of Pakistan's most authoritarian rulers. A military dictator who ruled with an iron fist but fancied himself as the Mustafa Kemal Ataturk of Pakistan. Ataturk was a field marshal, the founding father and first president of Turkey. Credited with resurrecting Pakistan's economy, but also accused of desecrating the constitution, making a mockery of democracy and rampant rights abuses, Musharraf's is a conflicted legacy. Years after he left Pakistan, WION interviewed Musharraf in 2017. Listen in to what he told us.
We have formed a structure for the party going vertically down to the district level and tehsil and union council levels. Not everywhere, but to quite substantially. And laterally we've opened wings. So therefore we have a good organization. But I think we need to do much more.
Commissioned in the Pakistan Army in 1964, Musharraf swiftly rose through the ranks. In 1998, the then Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif appointed him as the all-powerful Pakistan Army chief, a decision that Sharif came to bitterly regret. Musharraf's stint as the army chief was riddled with controversies. 1999 was a watershed year. Musharraf made a huge miscalculation and decided to send his troops to invade Kargil in Kashmir. The Kargil war with India turned out to be the biggest debacle of Musharraf's career. Pakistan was handed a humiliating defeat by the Indian army. In an ultimate act of cowardice and betrayal, Musharraf, as the army chief, did not even acknowledge the sacrifice of his soldiers, refusing to take back their dead bodies.
Dear brothers and sisters, we shall preserve the integrity.
Nawaz Sharif had made up his mind to sack Musharraf following the Kargil misadventure, but the army chief had other plans. In October 1999, Musharraf staged a coup, overthrew the Nawaz Sharif government, declared a state of emergency, and appointed himself as the chief executive of Pakistan. That was the beginning of Musharraf's 9-year reign. In 2001, Musharraf appointed himself President of Pakistan. The man who had masterminded the Kargil war now wanted a place in the history books as a peacemaker between India and Pakistan. Musharraf and the then Indian Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee together made concerted peace efforts. Then came the Agra summit, dubbed as historic, but one that ended in diplomatic disaster. And the same year, in December 2001, Pakistani terrorists launched an audacious attack on India's parliament. The two countries nearly went to war following this terror attack. However, 2 years later, the Indian Prime Minister offered a hand of friendship to Pakistan, Musharraf grabbed the opportunity to boost his image and a ceasefire between the two countries was announced. But before all this, the 9/11 terror attacks in the United States in 2001 had already reshaped the world. With Musharraf as president, Pakistan joined America's war on terror. In exchange, Pakistan received enormous military and financial aid. It bolstered the country's economy, but also placed Musharraf in the crosshairs of Islamist terror groups. There were multiple assassination attempts on the general over the years. As years wore on, Musharraf became increasingly authoritarian. He barred Benazir Bhutto and Nawaz Sharif from holding public office, held dubious elections, and changed the constitution of Pakistan, giving himself sweeping powers. He famously said, "The constitution is just a piece of paper to be thrown into the dustbin."
I enjoyed every moment of my command.
In 2007, he won another controversial election, but this time Pakistan's top court did not validate Musharraf's victory. The dictator declared yet another emergency. Faced with growing anger and resistance, he ruthlessly arrested opposition leaders, sacked judges, and committed numerous excesses. In December 2007, former Prime Minister Benazir Bhutto was assassinated at an election rally in Rawalpindi. She had asked Musharraf for a better security cover, but he had refused. Many blamed Musharraf for Bhutto's assassination.
Less than 24 hours before her tragic assassination, we met in Peshawar. She was assassinated the next day in Rawalpindi, not far away. And in that 90-minute plus private meeting that I had with Benazir Bhutto, she railed against Musharraf and specifically wanted me to convey to then Senator Joe Biden, who was chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee and a candidate for the presidency of the U.S., that Musharraf was trying to actively rig the elections against her and putting every obstacle in her way.
Eventually, Musharraf resigned as president in August 2008 after the ruling coalition threatened to have him impeached. He left Pakistan to live in exile. A Pakistani court sentenced him to death after finding him guilty of treason for imposing the emergency in 2007. That ruling was later overturned. The dictator, who was once the most powerful man in Pakistan and the toast of the Western world, had to spend his last years in exile. In his memoir, titled In the Line of Fire, Musharraf quoted Napoleon and Richard Nixon as role models for leadership. The hubris of the two historical figures is often blamed for their eventual downfall. Many would argue that in the end, it was hubris that sealed Musharraf's fate as well. Perhaps that's how history will judge the man. Let's now turn our attention to the Adani saga. It's a story of how India's biggest business empire has gone into a tailspin, thanks to a damaging report by a US-based investor research firm. Hindenburg Research has accused industrialist Gautam Adani-led conglomerate of brazen stock manipulation and accounting fraud. Within just days of the highly damaging report being published, shares of the Adani Group nosedived. The 7 listed firms have lost half their market value. That's over $100 billion. And Gautam Adani, who till recently was the second richest man in the world, is not even among the top 10 now. Can the Adani Group weather the storm?
It's become about mega turbulence, troubling and real, striking at the India rising story. The Adani Group of companies, often termed one of India's biggest corporate success stories, is hit by a report from research group Hindenburg that claims findings of dubious accounting and business practices. Consider this. At the start of 2023, just 5 weeks back, 4 Adani companies were in the top 20 Indian firms. The collective value of 7 publicly traded Adani companies was $220 billion, and Gautam Adani was the second richest man in the world. Cut to Thursday, the 2nd of February. Total loss of value of Adani's empire topped $100 billion after it abruptly cancelled a $2.5 billion stock sale. Ironically, the FPO was meant to reduce debt levels and restore confidence. More than a third of the conglomerate's value has gone up in smoke, even as the billionaire himself, his wealth and rich list standing considerably deflated, insists charges against him are malicious and baseless.
After a fully subscribed FPO, yesterday's decision of his withdrawal would have surprised many. But considering the volatility of the market seen yesterday, our board strongly felt that it would not have been morally correct to proceed with the FPO.
The crisis, since the damning Hindenburg report first emerged, is now into the third week. Shares of the Adani business empire have tanked. They've already lost half of their value. The conglomerate has denied media reports that it plans to cut or trim spending as it looks desperately to restore a shaken confidence. Standard Chartered, Citibank and Credit Suisse assigned zero value to Adani assets as collateral for loans to clients. Questions were raised around exposure of the Life Insurance Corporation of India and the State Bank of India to the Adani empire. The stock market rout in the group's shares has triggered a series of warnings from credit rating agencies. S&P Dow Jones removed Adani Enterprises from the Dow Jones Sustainability Index. There's even a UK connect. Former Prime Minister Boris Johnson's brother Joe Johnson had to quit from the board of Adani's Elara Capital. The ripples run to Bangladesh too. The country now wants revision of a power purchase agreement it signed with Adani Power in 2017. A group that was till a few days ago India's corporate pride badge is now in some hot water for the longer term too.
I would argue that Wall Street's now effectively closed to Adani for the foreseeable future until these allegations are resolved one way or the other. And if they're not resolved, Wall Street will probably stay closed permanently to the Adani Group.
The crash, though seemingly sudden and dramatic, has been brewing for long. The Hindenburg report points at a rot that runs deep. One, use of shell companies is perhaps the most damaging charge. Gautam Adani's brother Vinod Adani and his friends allegedly created a large number of shell companies based in Mauritius and used them to park and manipulate stocks and to launder money. Hindenburg contends the firm used its shell companies to inflate revenue at their listed firms. The report says the motive for the manipulations is that some of the debt has been backed up by shares in the company. Higher market capitalization then allowed these companies to borrow more than they should. The group played fast and loose with exchange listing rules. Intra-party transactions were used to make itself look more credit-worthy than it truly is. The Adani Group is seen as propped up by the government in New Delhi, and the politics was not far behind. Opposition-driven protests and arrests on the streets and a spate of suspensions in Parliament forced by disruptions by opposition lawmakers. Prime Minister Narendra Modi rubbished charges of wrongdoing by his government. Fact is, the Adani saga has to be seen not just out of interest in the firm itself, but more in what changes it may or may not bring to business, investing and regulatory practices in India.
Nepal's Game of Thrones is well and truly on. It's been barely a month since it was cobbled together, but the coalition government is already on shaky ground. Rabi Lamichane's RSP has pulled out of the alliance. Prime Minister Prachanda and his ally, the former Prime Minister KP Oli, can't see eye to eye on anything. Whose man should become president is a major bone of contention. With deep fissures threatening its existence, is the fragile coalition government on its last legs? The cracks get deeper, the sticking points get stickier. Just over a month into a new government, the rumblings threaten to turn into big tremors that could consume what's now confirmed as a fragile alliance teetering on the brink. In terms of numbers and on the face of it, the Oli-Prachanda alliance is likely safe. But look closer and deep tensions are simmering within. The latest rifts in the grouping have erupted over this man, Rashtriya Swatantrata Party chief Rabi Lamichane. Lamichane reacquired his Nepali citizenship days after the Supreme Court declared his lawmaker status invalid. But Prime Minister Dahal refused to reappoint him as Home Minister. The outcome? Lamichhane decided to pull out of the government. The 19 members of his party, the RSP, will now support the government from the outside. He has come out all guns blazing against Dahal and Oli, even warning that the alliance poses a threat to Nepal's neighbors.
I'm going to give my statement in Hindi, especially for the people of India and Prime Minister Mr. Modi. Modi ji,
the people who are looting here in your name, those people are not thinking of advancing relations between Nepal and India.
Numbers-wise, Lamichhane's party pulling out of the coalition makes little difference. The Oli Dahal-led alliance still has the support of 268 minus 19. That's 249 members in the House, far from losing a majority. But the tremors hit hard. The exit of RSP Big Oli backers raises alarm bells for Team Oli, and things seem to have moved in the direction of a bigger break in the Oli-Dahal tie-up.
Differences have emerged among the political parties over the power-sharing arrangement of the ministerial portfolios and the presidency. This raises fears of political instability in the Himalayan nation, the nation that has seen 30 governments in as many years.
Cracks in the alliance originated in differences and insecurities between the ruling alliance's two biggest leaders, KP Oli and Pushpa Kamal Dahal, also known as Prachanda. Take a look at just some of the long and growing list of sticking points between the two. First, the rotational leadership deal that seems to be flimsy to stay alive too long. It's been a bone of contention since the alliance took off. And word is rife that Dahal may not be willing to give his seat to KP Oli after 2.5 years, as promised. One report even suggests that Dahal is keen to break the alliance with Oli completely and join hands with Sher Bahadur Deuba of the Nepal Congress to stay in power. Second, an election in March for the post of president. Oli wants his man for the post, but Dahal has ruled that out, fearing that Oli controlling the speaker as well as the president's post would give him too much power, even the power to topple the government. And third, what Dahal calls the ganging up factor. Some Maoist leaders say Dahal already feels ganged up against by Oli's UML and other parties in the alliance close to him. It was this factor that led to Dahal refusing the Home Minister's post for Lamichhane. The bigger picture remains one of a government on thin ice, and Nepal is in for an extended phase of political instability and churning. Now here's a heartwarming story from India's financial capital, Mumbai. This is the story of Dilesh Parekh, a passionate photographer and collector who passed away recently. Why are we talking about him? It's because Parekh held the Guinness World Record for owning the most antique cameras. Take a look at his enviable collection.
For some, it's a hobby. For others, a passion. But for this man, the camera was the fulcrum of his whole life. We're talking about Dilesh Parekh, a photographer and collector in India's financial capital, Mumbai. Parekh passed away recently at the age of 69. But what he leaves behind for his family is a rich and priceless legacy like no other. One that includes a Guinness World Record for an unmatched collection of antique cameras. We met with Parekh's family, who shared with us fascinating nuggets of his journey and life's work.
See, his grandfather had a few pieces of cameras, which the grandfather, as he was aging, was not really interested. And my husband was most interested. This is the way his collection initially started. Initially, I thought that it was just that, your elders have something which they don't want, and the youngsters in the family take over if they like it.
In 2003, this Mumbai photographer entered the Guinness Book of Records with his collection of 2,634 antique cameras. His insatiable desire for these gadgets ensured that Parekh broke his own record a decade later with a collection of 4,425 antique cameras, the oldest one dating back to 1890.
As you can see, from the size of a button to a huge box with mounts, he has almost everything in his collection. This is the room where he kept his treasure. It looks like a museum by itself. And over the decades, he collected cameras and made it to the Guinness World Record by having the maximum number of antique cameras, that is 4,425.
Even as the Parikhs mourn the loss of their family member, one thing is evident. They are immensely proud of the rich legacy they have inherited and have resolved to keep it alive. Looking at it through his lens, it would be safe to say Dilesh Parikh led quite a picture-perfect life, captured in the record books and framed for posterity.
And finally, it was music's biggest night, the 65th Annual Grammy Awards, and it was a night to remember for many South Asian artists. India's Ricky Cage won his third Grammy this year for his album Divine Tides. With this feat, Cage has become the only Indian to have 3 Grammys. White Sun, a band with 2 Sikh members, Hari Jivan and Guru Jas Khalsa, won a Grammy for Mystic Mirror, an album that features Shabad or a prayer from the Guru Granth Sahib, the holy book of Sikhism. And making the night even more special was a collaborative performance by 2 musicians from India and Pakistan. Now that's not something you normally expect to see, is it? Indian sitarist Anushka Shankar and Pakistani singer Arooj Aftab may not have picked up a Grammy, but they certainly won hearts. A special moment that. Well, that brings us to the end of this edition of Inside South Asia. Hope you enjoyed the show. Do join us again next week as we return with all the action from the region. Till then, stay safe and well. I'm Neha Khanna signing off. Thanks for watching and stay tuned to WION. World is One.